Everyone thinks Warren Buffett became one of the richest people in history because he picked the right stocks. That's the story every book tells. It's the story financial media repeats. And it's the story almost everyone believes. It's also why almost nobody will ever become Warren Buffett. Because if Buffett's fortune came from stock picks, then anyone could copy his portfolio. Millions of people have tried. None of them became Warren Buffett. So here's the question almost nobody asks. What if the stocks were never the real advantage? What if the fortune wasn't built by choosing better investments, but by building a position that made extraordinary wealth almost inevitable? That's the part history rarely tells. And once you see it, you'll never look at wealth the same way again. Everyone thinks Warren Buffett became one of the richest people in history because he picked the right stocks. That's the story every book tells. It's the story financial media repeats, and it's the story almost everyone believes. It's also why almost nobody will ever become Warren Buffett. Because if Buffett's fortune came from stock picks, then anyone could copy his portfolio. Millions of people have tried. None of them became Warren Buffett. So here's the question almost nobody asks. What if the stocks were never the real advantage? What if the fortune wasn't built by choosing better investments, but by building a position that made extraordinary wealth almost inevitable? That's the part history rarely tells. And once you see it, you'll never look at wealth the same way again. When people think about Warren Buffett, they picture stock charts, annual shareholder meetings, Berkshire Hathaway, billions of dollars, the Oracle of Omaha. They picture one of the greatest investors who ever lived. But Buffett never described himself as someone trying to beat the market every day. In fact, he spent much of his career doing something that seemed almost irresponsible to everyone around him. He waited. While other investors traded, Buffett waited. While Wall Street reacted to headlines, Buffett waited. While television screamed about the next opportunity, Buffett quietly read another annual report. It looked passive. It looked boring. It even looked lazy. But beneath that quiet exterior, something extraordinary was happening. Because Buffett wasn't trying to predict the market, he was trying to understand something much more important. Why certain businesses keep winning, even when everything around them changes. That question changed everything. Because the moment you stop asking, which stock should I buy? And start asking, what kind of business becomes impossible to replace? You stop thinking like a trader and start thinking like an owner. That shift sounds small. It isn't. It separates people who chase opportunities from people who quietly build fortunes. Most investors spend their lives searching for the next great investment. Buffett spent his life searching for businesses that didn't need constant attention. Businesses whose advantages became stronger with time. Businesses competitors couldn't easily copy. Businesses that kept producing value whether anyone was watching them or not. Notice something. We're 10 minutes into Buffett's philosophy, and we still haven't talked about a single stock. Because the stocks were never the lesson, they were simply the evidence. The real lesson was hidden underneath. Buffett wasn't collecting investments, he was collecting positions. And once you understand why that distinction matters, you begin to realize that Warren Buffett wasn't following a financial strategy. He was following a principle that has quietly governed wealth for centuries. There is one word Warren Buffett used over and over again, a word that explains almost every investment he ever made. Most people hear it, but almost nobody stops to think about what it really means. The moat. Buffett loved businesses with economic moats. On the surface, it sounds like financial jargon. It isn't. It's one of the oldest strategic ideas in human history. Imagine two castles. One stands in the middle of an open field. The other is surrounded by a deep river, thick stone walls, and a single narrow bridge. Both castles may look equally impressive, but only one is truly difficult to conquer. The second castle doesn't survive because its soldiers fight harder. It survives because its position does most of the fighting for it. That's exactly what Buffett was looking for. Not companies that worked harder. Companies whose position made competition painfully expensive. Take Warren Buffett's investment in the Coca-Cola Company. Most people see a soft drink. Buffett saw something completely different. He saw billions of people who didn't ask for a cola. They asked for Coke. He saw restaurants that would lose customers if they removed it. He saw decades of trust, habit, distribution, and brand recognition that no competitor could simply recreate with more advertising. That isn't a product, that's a position. Then there was See's Candies. To many investors, it looked like a regional candy company, nothing extraordinary. But Buffett noticed something everyone else ignored. Every Christmas, families returned. Every Valentine's Day, they returned again. The company barely needed to convince customers to buy. Tradition did the selling. Loyalty protected the margins. Competitors could copy the chocolate. They couldn't copy decades of emotional association. Again, not a product, a position. Notice the pattern. Buffett wasn't asking, can this company make more money next quarter? He was asking, how difficult would it be to take this business away? Those are completely different questions. One focuses on earnings. The other focuses on permanence. And permanence compounds. This is why so many people misunderstand Buffett. They study his portfolio instead of studying his questions. They copy what he bought, but they never learn how he saw. Because his real advantage wasn't information. Millions of investors had access to the same financial statements. It wasn't intelligence. Wall Street is full of brilliant analysts. It wasn't speed. Computers could always process data faster. His advantage was perspective. He evaluated businesses from a position almost nobody else occupied. While everyone else was trying to predict tomorrow, Buffett was asking, will this business still be stronger 20 years from now? That single question eliminated nearly everything the market obsessed over. And something remarkable happened. The less he competed with everyone else, the more extraordinary his results became. At first glance, that sounds like an investing lesson. It isn't. It's a law that appears everywhere wealth accumulates. In business, in history, in politics, in power. And centuries before Warren Buffett ever described an economic moat, another man had already discovered exactly the same principle. Not on Wall Street, but in the fractured city-states of Renaissance Italy. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli, and he reached the same conclusion, using an entirely different language. 500 years before Warren Buffett ever spoke about economic moats, before stock markets, before corporations, before Berkshire Hathaway, a political philosopher in Renaissance Italy was asking exactly the same question. Not how do you become powerful, but how do you stay powerful? His name was Niccolo Machiavelli. Most people know him as the author of The Prince. They remember the quotes about fear, manipulation, politics, power. But they miss the deeper question that runs through almost every page he wrote. Why do some positions survive, while others collapse? Machiavelli spent years watching rulers lose kingdoms they had fought decades to build. Again and again, he noticed the same pattern. The weakest rulers weren't always defeated because their enemies were stronger. Many were defeated because their position required constant effort just to survive. Every victory had to be defended. Every alliance had to be renegotiated. Every rebellion had to be crushed. They never stopped fighting. Force kept them alive, but force was expensive, and eventually it failed. Now compare that idea to Buffett. Every day, millions of investors fight the market. They chase momentum, react to headlines, refresh stock prices, predict interest rates. They win some battles, lose others, then start all over again tomorrow. Buffett refused to play that game. He didn't want businesses that needed heroic leadership every quarter. He wanted businesses that defended themselves. Businesses whose customers returned automatically. Businesses competitors couldn't easily replace. Businesses that became stronger simply by continuing to exist. That isn't just good investing. It's exactly what Machiavelli meant by superior position. The greatest advantage isn't defeating competitors. It's making competition irrelevant. Look at history. The great trading republic of Venice wasn't the richest because it had the largest army. It occupied one of the most defensible commercial positions in Europe, protected by its lagoon, connected to the world's most valuable trade routes. It forced rivals to pay enormous costs just to challenge it. Geography became strategy. Position became protection. Now look at Berkshire Hathaway. Its insurance businesses generated billions of dollars in float. That float became permanent capital. Permanent capital became opportunity. Opportunity bought great businesses. Great businesses generated more capital. The system strengthened itself. Notice the similarity. Venice wasn't defending wealth every day. Its position generated wealth. Berkshire wasn't chasing opportunities every day. Its position created opportunities. The names changed. The centuries changed. The mechanism never did. This is where most people misunderstand success. They see extraordinary results and assume extraordinary effort. History suggests something else. Extraordinary results usually come from extraordinary positioning. A mediocre business in a perfect position often outlives a brilliant business in the wrong one. A patient investor with permanent capital often defeats a genius forced to think one quarter at a time. A ruler with natural defenses often survives longer than a stronger army fighting in open ground. The pattern repeats, again, and again, and again, across kingdoms, across companies, across centuries, because wealth, like power, doesn't accumulate to the person who works the hardest. It accumulates to the person who occupies the position that compounds. And once you understand that, you stop asking the question most people ask, what should I buy? Instead, you begin asking a much more dangerous question. What position am I building that becomes stronger, even while I sleep? Here's the uncomfortable truth. You cannot become Warren Buffett by buying Warren Buffett stocks. Millions of people already have. Every quarter, the world waits for Warren Buffett to release Berkshire Hathaway's holdings. The headlines appear within minutes. Buffett bought this. Buffett sold that. Thousands of investors rush to copy him, and yet almost none of them achieve anything close to his results. Why? Because they're copying the evidence, not the mechanism. Imagine walking into a cathedral, taking measurements of every wall, counting every window, copying every stone, without ever understanding the foundation beneath it. You might recreate the appearance. You'll never recreate the strength. That's what most people do with Buffett. They copy the portfolio. They never build the position that made the portfolio possible. Think about the advantages Buffett spent decades constructing. He had permanent capital. He had patience that wasn't dictated by quarterly performance. He had relationships built over half a century. He had credibility that opened doors unavailable to almost anyone else. When Buffett called a CEO, the phone was answered. When Berkshire wanted to buy a company, owners often came to him first. Not because he was the richest man in the room, because he had spent decades becoming the safest pair of hands in the room. That wasn't luck. That wasn't charisma. That was position. There's another lesson hidden inside Buffett's career that people rarely notice. Most investors spend their lives asking, how do I make more money? Buffett asked a different question. How do I make better decisions? That sounds subtle. It isn't. Money is the result. Decision quality is the cause. For decades, he protected something more valuable than his portfolio. He protected his thinking. He surrounded himself with people who challenged him instead of flattering him. His partnership with Charlie Munger wasn't valuable because Munger agreed with him. It was valuable because Munger forced Buffett to improve the way he reasoned. They weren't building wealth. They were building a decision-making machine. And over time, that machine produced wealth almost as a byproduct. This is why copying Buffett is impossible. Not because he's a genius, because you're seeing the final chapter without seeing the previous 70 years. You're seeing the tree, not the roots. You're seeing the castle, not the foundation. You're seeing the compounding, not the decades of restraint that allowed compounding to happen. That's why most people quit too early. They expect extraordinary outcomes from ordinary timelines. Buffett's greatest advantage wasn't intelligence. It wasn't information. It wasn't even investing. It was consistency. The willingness to keep following the same framework when everyone around him was abandoning theirs. The market constantly rewards excitement. Buffett built a fortune on boredom. The media rewards activity. Buffett rewarded inactivity. The crowd searched for the next opportunity. Buffett spent his life protecting the one position he had already built. And that's the lesson almost nobody talks about. The world's greatest investor didn't become extraordinary by constantly changing direction. He became extraordinary because he found a framework worthy of decades and then refused to betray it. Every generation searches for shortcuts, the next great stock, the perfect business, the hidden investment, the secret strategy. But after studying the life of Warren Buffett, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. He never spent his life searching for shortcuts. He spent his life building a position. That's why people misunderstand his fortune. They see billions of dollars. Buffett saw decades. They see extraordinary returns. Buffett saw ordinary decisions repeated without interruption. They see the portfolio. Buffett saw the framework. Because in the end, money was never the product. Money was the consequence. The real product was a way of thinking that quietly improved every decision that followed. This is why the richest lesson Buffett leaves behind has almost nothing to do with investing. He teaches us that the most valuable thing you can own isn't a stock, or a business, or even capital. It's a position built through knowledge, through patience, through reputation, through trust, through decades of making decisions that most people considered too slow or too boring to matter. And then one day, those small decisions become impossible to separate from what the world calls success. Look back through history. Niccolo Machiavelli studied kingdoms. Buffett studied businesses. Different centuries, different worlds. Yet both reached the same conclusion. The strongest position is the one that no longer requires constant fighting to survive. That's the difference between force and architecture, between income and ownership, between chasing opportunity and becoming the kind of person opportunities begin to seek. So before you ask, what should I invest in next? Ask yourself something much harder. If everything you earn stopped tomorrow, what would still be working for you? Would your knowledge continue creating opportunities? Would your reputation continue opening doors? Would your relationships continue producing trust? Would your assets continue generating income? Or would everything you've built stop the moment you do? Because that's the difference between having an income and having a position. The world doesn't reward effort equally. It rewards structures. It rewards leverage. It rewards ownership. It rewards systems that continue creating value long after the builder has stepped away. That's why the greatest lesson from Warren Buffett was never, buy this stock. It was, build something that becomes more valuable because time passes, not despite it.